Hey, what's up? It's Mark at Alchemist.camp, where we learn Elixir and Phoenix by building things. Today, I'm going to give you a walkthrough about something that's going to be useful for you if you have a primarily content-based site, as Alchemist.camp itself is. That is an XML sitemap. You may or may not have thought about this, but if you use WordPress or similar CMS publishing platforms, there's pretty much always going to be either a built-in or a default plugin you can use to generate these. If you're making your own site with Phoenix or, whatever backend framework, you probably don't get this out of the box. Probably want it, though, if you want Google to know what to index. So let's look at Alchemist camps. We've got a sitemap.xml, and we can see all of the major pages here. These are ones that never change, and then we've got the index ones that change more frequently. Down here you can see it's a nested structure, and there is one for every single episode and every single article on the site. So how did I do this? Well, it's not actually that complicated. It is enough though that I'm just going to do a walkthrough instead of typing everything out as a screencast as I go. Let me full screen this. First thing to look at is the router. I've got a get/sitemap.xml. It goes to a sitemap controller and an index action. That's the only thing that's in the controller. So the sitemap controller is also backed by a sitemap view, which we'll get to in a second. It's basically pulling in all of the contexts and specific schemas necessary from I've got them all in my content context. So there are articles, episodes, podcasts, and resources. I want all those to get indexed. Also the pages, but we'll get to those in a second because it's a little bit different. Articles, episodes, and resources are pretty straightforward. So I just use the context.list functions to get them all, and I pass them all into the render function. Podcasts are a little bit unusual, and that's because they're a single table in the database, but I've got three separate index pages for them. And that's because I've split my podcast into things. One is called Coding and Bootstrapping. It's all about programming and entrepreneurial things. One is called Learning Machine, and it's really about kind of geeky study hacks and how to learn more efficiently and how to think about what you want to prioritize. It's everything about learning. Then the last one is called the Metacast, and it's got a lot of snippets of things from other people's podcasts or books or whatever kind of long form content I found interesting, mental models, that kind of stuff. And they're all backed by the same controller. In fact, I'll open up that controller just so you can see what it does. I've got an index that gets all the visible podcasts, and that's basically just filtering on what's been published. And then in code, learn, and meta, I've basically just filtered it down so that we only see it if it's, actually this is a little bit of indirection here, but I've basically got this podcast show filter that just filters it down to only show you the name of the show you're looking at, or podcasts that are marked all, or if you're looking at all, you see them all. So it's a little bit messy and maybe not even a good idea, and I had to deal with it in my sitemap. So pass in the various types of pages that need to be indexed, and this should be all your content pages. And then we've got a sitemap view, which has a single special function. Most of your views look kind of like this, but we've got this one function for formatting the date in the way that a sitemap would do it, and that's just a simple conversion you can see here. Then, since it's an index.xml file as opposed to HTML, we've got to put a response content type into the plug.con, and that response type is text/XML, and then the template itself is an index.xml.eex. And it works just like an index.html.exx or index.json.exx. I alias the content podcast because I need a special helper function for getting the information out of podcasts since they're weird. Then I've got a base path, which I just store up in a variable at the top. And then this opens the XML document. This closes it. And I made one block like this for every single individual page. And these are coming in through the page controller. They're not in the router, so Phoenix doesn't know what their routes are. They're all just right at the base path. So you go to alchemist.camp/terms or /privacy or /start. And each of these here are index routes. And it's basically you give it a location, which is the URL, as we did above, how often that content changes. If in doubt, set this to be more often. This basically just lets search engines know how often they should crawl it. I don't really want the podcast index crawled all the time. And a priority, and that's just your indication of how important the content is, but Google is going to do what Google wants to do. So maybe that it doesn't even get paid attention to that much. Then these sections are all the individual show pages of different kinds of content. So this will get every single article, and then for those articles, we'll get the URL using the standard helpers. We'll get last modified date by using the article.updated@, which is added by default if you're using Phoenix and Ecto. And then I'm passing that to a format date function, which we got from the sitemap view. And I put whatever priority I thought appropriate. Basically, for Alchemist Camp, the articles and the episodes are the important things, and the other things are not quite as important. So I did all of this. So this is not being generated once a day. It's not being generated at compile time. This is actually being generated every single time the route is hit. So that may not be the best sort of thing to do if you have a really high traffic site, but I wouldn't automatically discard it. The reason for that is it's not really that much. So sitemap.xml. We can see if we look in the network tab and load this again, the entire document in the case of Alchemist Camp is not that big. It's 2.89 kilobytes. And there are hundreds of pages on the site. So if you have a truly massive site, then probably what you want to do is you want to do the same kind of build process, but put it in a recurring task that you do once a day or once an hour or whatever is appropriate for your site, and then just serve it statically. But for most sites, unless you have really huge amounts of traffic, you should be fine. In the case of Alchemist Camp, this method has been more than sufficient. There are much heavier pages on the site that have been, well, quite frankly, pummeled through social media, especially the main episodes page. And one of the tutorials on deployment got up to the first page, I think number 4 on Hacker News, and it wasn't even close to the limit of what the server could handle, which at the time was a $5 DigitalOcean droplet. If you want one of those, click on this link here. I know there are lots of referral codes, but I recommend mine because it's mine, and that helps ensure that you keep getting these free tutorials. If you get to the point where a dynamic XML sitemap is not going to work, the first thing I would do would be look at caching the result of it, because all of these list functions are pretty expensive because you're pulling out every single article, every single episode, every single resource from the database at the same time. So step 1 is definitely just cache all of these. You could look under the caching tag, and actually I'll just show it to you now on episodes. Caching DB request with ETS. I would take a look at this and basically just cache not all of the articles, episodes, and resources, but cache the output XML, since that's not too much data. Once it gets to where that's too big also, next step is you just build it as a recurring process that you do once a day or something like that. And we also have scheduling recurring jobs with GenServer. This is what you would look at to do that. And hopefully this is enough to get you by for whatever level of traffic you currently have. And if you have more than that, congratulations. That's it for today. See you next time.